This week's essay was, of course, you can prove a negative. And this is one that I've had in mind for a little while, at least since I did the Hitchens-Craig one, because this has driven me crazy forever. That, for as long as I've been seeing people argue about anything really on the internet, I've been running into these claims that you can't prove a negative, or sometimes people
they come up quite a lot on Reddit as philosophy.
I would be shocked if it did not, right? That people will sort of say, well, of course you can't prove a negative, but blah, blah, blah. Like it's just presented as something that everybody knows, is maybe even sort of self-evident. People talk about it, as if this is like a law of logic. And sometimes there's like a variation of it I've run into that's it's impossible to prove a universal negative. And that's yes, you see the chat from both channels. And that one especially, it's impossible to prove a universal negative, sounds like, something that, Aristotle would have said in the prior analytics or something. And you can't prove it.
But what you find out in logic, there's a really big difference, almost between like a really big finite number and an infinite number, between really hard to prove and logically impossible.
Yeah, it's the dead, almost dead distinction from the Princess Bride. And in fact, it's not even necessarily true that it's harder to prove a negative than a positive statement. Sometimes it is. It depends on the context. But yeah, people treat this as if it's this basic logical principle. You can't prove a negative. The particular context where I was running into it, I don't know, a month or two ago, whatever that was about the criticism that I'd written of Christopher Hitchens' 2009 debate with William Lane Craig, where one of the things I pointed out is that the nominal topic was, does God exist? And Dr. Craig makes a case for yes. And Hitchens doesn't, even pretend to make a case for no. And in responding to that essay, I saw several people say, well, of course he did it. You can't prove a negative. Because this is something, everybody knows. It's just, goes without saying. I have absolutely no idea where this comes from originally. I would love to know what the patient zero for you can't prove a negative is, but it's quite popular among your more aggravating kind of online atheist.
People who, for whatever reason, are dedicated towards not making an argument for atheism.
Yes, exactly.
They argue for hours online about how they shouldn't have to make an argument.
Exactly. The kind of person for whom atheism is very important, and it's also very important that they not have to argue for it. Those people love the claim that you can't prove a negative. But I'll see people in all sorts of contexts bring this up. I'm very unsurprised to hear that it's all over, the Reddit Ask Philosophy. I did try to, in an effort to unpack this as sympathetically as possible in the essay. I mean, I brought up a time when I could remember saying many times that you can't prove a negative. As a undergraduate who was spending a lot of time arguing with people about the impending invasion of Iraq in 2002, 2003, I would constantly encounter people who were sure that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, or would say things like, well, Saddam Hussein doesn't want a war. He should just show us that he doesn't have weapons of mass destruction. That would drive me crazy. And I would reach for you can't prove a negative to try to explain why. But of course, I think what I meant by it, looking back on it, the sort of, or at least the defensible core of what I meant by it, was it's not a reasonable claim to make that there's something that Iraq could or should be doing that they're not doing to show that they don't have weapons of mass destruction. It's particularly insane to say that their failure to do whatever it is that you think they should do is enough to show they do it.
Right. I mean, when you're convinced of someone's guilt, no evidence just means they're sneaky.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think we are unfair on negative claims. Like, you would take as an equivalent to like someone saying like there is a book in my house, the equivalent of like there's no book in my house. And like the method of proving that would be to show one book, and then the other method would be, I don't know, to exhaustively go through the house and it'd be like, well, there's no books here, there's no books there, there's no books over there. But I think the actual equivalent to those two situations is proving kind of like the full catalog of books in your house versus having no books in your house. Like if you live in a very censorious kind of like early, late 18th century, 19th century, I'll get there in the end, like Russian Empire house, and the censor is coming through to check if you have any banned books. That's the equivalent to try and prove there's no
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing that's true is that when you're talking about existence claims, and oftentimes when people say, you can't prove a negative, it's really unclear what they even mean by a negative. But when they say this, they often mean like existence claims. And it is true that that it's very often in many contexts much harder to show that there aren't any of something, that there's at least one of something if you do think that those are the right contrasts. But you could definitely show in like anything, there's no sense of the word prove in which it's generally impossible to prove a negative claim, or in which it's even necessarily easier across all contexts to prove a positive claim than a negative one. So, if prove means show by evidence that something is true, then I mean, surely we show by evidence that things don't exist all the time, and science. I mean, certainly,
turn out your pockets, kids.
yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. You show, it's like, oh no, show, look, nothing in my pockets, right? You show that's a very easy, straightforward case of showing by evidence that something doesn't exist. A more interesting case of showing something doesn't exist is like you show by evidence that special theory of relativity is true, and you've therefore shown that there are no instances of, faster than light space travel, that, there's, that happens all the time. If negative just means showing that something's false, then even ignoring the fact that, if something's true, it's false, that it's false, and all that sort of, nitpicky stuff. A lot of the way science works is all about showing that things are false. You have a theory, you run an experiment, the experiment shows that the theory wasn't true, right? You have just proved in that sense a negative. And sometimes when pressed on this, people will say, oh, well, but that doesn't prove it, because it could still be
I
true.
can't believe these atheists hate science.
Yeah, exactly. And say, well, hold on. In the sense that doesn't prove it, in the sense of like proving it beyond all possible doubt or whatever. Okay, sure. It's very, very difficult for most interesting claims, if not impossible, to prove it past that threshold. But the same goes for positives as well as negatives, that I think I'm having this conversation with you right now, but, I could be dreaming, I could be hallucinating, I could be a brain in a vat being subject to complex electrochemical blah, 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 right? There are all sorts of ways that I could be wrong about that. You can't, prove beyond the shadow of those possibilities that none of that's true. And when it comes
you can, it's very, very hard to prove as like a universal negative that there's no kind of like horned horses on any planet in the whole universe. But equally, it's the same exact difficulty to prove, to kind of give a universal positive account of all the kind of four-legged animals in the whole universe.
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to things that we can prove, to the extent that you can absolutely prove anything, you could certainly prove negatives, including negative existence claims. There, you know, that there is no largest even number. Very easy proof, right? Assume that there is one and add 2 to it. There's no set of all sets that don't, you know, there's no set of all sets that are not members of themselves. You know, there are no physical objects that are
I wouldn't
literally
call that an
bound.
easy one.
Yeah, I mean, there are, like, I mean, this is, I mean, people who are proving things in that sense of proof, logicians and mathematicians, assuming things, deriving contradictions from it, and concluded that they aren't true is one of the main tools in their arsenal. So yeah, they're just, it's just a bizarre claim that never seems to die, but there's no sense whatsoever in which it's true, that, you know, there's a special problem with proven negatives in every context that there isn't with proven positives. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.